Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here. I'm really just honored to be a part of this community. I am absolutely honored on a weekly basis and humbled to be in the company of the Garrison Fellows and to learn to grow with them, especially because I've had the privilege of doing so over the last several months, several years since the onset of the global pandemic. So it's been really just incredible to have them as just a cohesive unit that we can rely on and be part of my community of care. So before we get started and before I bring Sharon on, what I'd like to do is just start with a sit so we can all fully arrive. Just a short practice together. And so I'll invite you to consider closing your eyes or lowering your gaze, whichever feels more comfortable for you. It's really your choice. And if you're sitting on a chair or on a couch, I invite you to put your feet flat on the floor. And your arms can either be along your side or on your lap, or you can even put one hand on your heart center and one on your stomach, and really feel the chest rise and the stomach rise and fall, and feel connected to yourself after a long day. So let's start with a deep, long, cleansing breath, inhaling in through the nose, and then gently exhaling out through the mouth. Again, deep inhale in through the nose, and a gentle exhale out through the mouth. Beginning to note through your senses what you hear. What do you hear surrounding you? Maybe it's the traffic, or a distant dog barking, or the humming of an air conditioner. Begin to tune in to your sense of hearing. Can you connect and hear the sound of your own breathing? Bringing attention now to your sense of feeling. Can you feel the clothes that are draped on your body? Really sense them. Can you feel the pull of gravity as you sit on this chair, on this couch? What do you feel? And now bringing awareness to the feeling at the rim of your nose when you inhale in. You feel the tickling on the rim on the inhale. And you sense a warmer quality of air on the exhale. Let's set the intention together for this evening. Ask yourself the question, how do I want to show up today, this evening, in this lecture? What quality What intention? Whatever words arise for you, just not holding on to them. Just allow them to wash over you. Connecting with your heart center, thanking yourself for showing up. Taking another long, deep inhale in through the nose. Exhaling out gently. Slowly widening the gaze, opening your eyes, arriving fully into the space together. As I bring on my teacher, my friend, so many things to me. I always say to Sharon, I am because you are, and that is the truth. And so I welcome you, Sharon. Thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up for me. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation with you today.
Thank you so much. It's so great to see you. And I've learned so much from you, including most recently, just a few minutes ago, how to blur my background. So that was extremely recent. And I'm so happy that I've learned it, because I kind of learned how to blur my face earlier, much earlier in our time, but I hadn't learned how to blur my background, which would have come in very useful. As people said, your bed's showing off, and it's like, I'm sorry, you know. So here we are. So thank you for all the lessons. There are a few questions I'd love to ask you. And I was struck by how perfect it is that we're here under the sponsorship, the auspices of the Garrison Institute, because your work is so expressive of using inner wisdom and outer expression as a harmonious whole. And your book is one of the great manifestations of that kind of combination. And I was learning recently and talking to somebody about this trait, this kind of habit we tend to have, called an attribution bias, which is like if you see somebody behaving unethically or in some way that's harmful, but
Right.
you kind of identify with them, same gender, same race, some form of identification, then we tend to say, oh, they ran into a bad crowd, or they were heavily influenced by circumstance. Whereas if you see that same act performed by somebody you feel distant from, they are the other in some way, then it's like, oh, they are irredeemably bad. They're just like a bad person. It's like this deep character trait. And I thought about how many assumptions we make all the time about, in a way, like who belongs and who doesn't, and who do we identify with and who's the other. And I'm just wondering, when you in your life kind of woke up to the sort of divisions that were maybe being created and offered to you, and when you learned to see differently.
Yeah, well, I mean, thank you for that question. And yeah, that's definitely an interesting topic to delve into, especially because in the last 4 years, or the last election cycle, certainly, and what we're going into in the next several years as well. I think that is a really important thing to delve into. I grew up, as you know, I was born in Jerusalem. I grew up as a very traditional Orthodox Jew. My mother is still very much an Orthodox Jew, Shomer Shabbat, Glatt kosher, the whole 9 yards. And so I grew up with this conditioning of like, this is not only who you're supposed to be, but this is how you are supposed to act. Many things are already sort of, planned out for you, and you're told literally what to do when you wake up in the morning, after you go to the bathroom, when you see a rainbow, right before you eat a specific type of food. And this continues on for the rest of your life, really. It's sort of like a roadmap, right? It's a roadmap to refining yourself as a human being. And I, was also, though, told this other narrative as an Israeli who had many family members all my family members served in the IDF and the Israeli Defense Forces. And many of my family members lost their lives in wars, 1967, 1973, in the 1980s, during the first Intifada, and also to terrorist attacks more recently in the 90s and on. And, so I was told from a very early age that there is an other, and that anybody that was really speaking or affiliated with that other language, that other religion, right? Whether Islam, speaking Arabic, etc., most likely would want to harm me and would not believe that I should have the right to live, or that I have the right as an Israeli to, live on Israeli soil. And I was a child, when your parents, when your family members reaffirm, especially what your parents are telling you, you believe this. And when you're, sort of catching the news, which everybody really is always glued to in Israel, then it's just reinforced continuously. It's reinforced by society. It's all the messages that you're getting. And it wasn't really until I, had the ability to be in real proximity from a heart center with somebody that was supposed to be the other. It wasn't until I was sitting with a woman named Fatima in Ramallah, in her living room, being served tea by her, just by happenstance, that I, had, as a graduate student, went to work for the World Health Organization, was assigned, because I knew Hebrew, to go work in Israel, but in the occupied territories of Israel, in Palestinian territories. And I was very scared. I was really nervous. I was like, wait a minute, I'm not allowed to go in there. Like, I can't cross that border check. I have an Israeli passport. If they find out I'm Israeli, they're going to totally do something to me, And we went there on a mission with a team of people from NGOs, from the United Nations organizations, to really learn more about human rights violations, to speak to mothers about just health care in general for their children, et cetera. And it was so fascinating to me that I went so quickly from being very afraid to marveling at how much this woman's children looked so much like my cousin's children, and things started to sort of melt away, but it planted a seed in me. It really planted a seed in me, because I started to really question and then think about all these other instances that happened to me earlier in life, right? And there's one specific story that I tell in the book, which is a story about when I was visiting in Israel. I was already living in the US with my parents who immigrated to the US. And I got lost in the old city of Jerusalem. And if you've never been there, there's many, within the walls of the old city, there are many different quarters. There's the Muslim quarter, there's the Jewish quarter, there's the, a Christian quarter, the Greek Orthodox quarter. There's just everything known to man is in there. And I took a wrong turn on the way to my aunt's house, and I got lost, and I was terrified. I was petrified. I was really young. And I remember that there was a young man who was Palestinian that, tapped me on the shoulder. And again, my first instinct was, oh, he wants to hurt me. Oh my God, this is it. This is the end. I immediately sort of went into panic mode, and he was there to help me to help me find my way back to the Jewish quarter. And then we shared a popsicle together, and we started talking about, whoever was popular at the time, pop culture, what music he likes, the fact that he wants to go to Disney World one day, because I told him I was from Florida. And so we were able to connect on such a human level. So I was able to really sort of I think from that experience in Fatima's living room, just go back in time and think, oh, well, wait a minute. There were a lot of holes being poked in this fabric that has been this veil that's sort of been placed over me, this conditioning. There's a lot of cracks in the stories that I've been told. And I really wanted to investigate those further. And I recognized that in the thing that sort of tied all of these instances together was the fact that I had proximity, that I had the ability to sit and actually form my own opinions and connect with somebody, at the heart center, in person, or in a very intimate way, right? And form my own opinions. And so I wanted to, continue to go down that path and put myself in situations that normally would make me very uncomfortable. And that's really what the gift of meditation has been able to also give me, right? I think a lot of times we think that meditation is supposed to make us comfortable. And we both know that that's not the case. It's really a matter of being able to really sit with our discomfort and identify it and get in there and understand why we're uncomfortable in the first place.
Well, if I was going to associate one word with you, it would be agency. And of course, this is echoed reading the blurbs on your book. I think John Kabat-Zinn called you a force of nature. And somebody else might have said, rightfully, she has the energy of 100 people or something like that. I can't remember exactly. But and what I wrote in the afterword to the book was what is true. Something happens in the world and I read about it or I hear about it. And I think that's really sad. Someone should think about doing something about that. What might that look like? And then before I know it, you've done it, you've organized it. It's it's happening, how does she move so fast? So would you say that's a natural trait, or is that something you also kind of uncovered through your spiritual practice?
I think inherently, I've always felt the responsibility or sense of responsibility for others. And I think, certainly when I was 12, and I also talk about this in the book, because I started to think about when was the first time that I really thought I was an activist, or that I thought of myself as an activist, or as someone that could actually, influence change in some way or capacity. And it was when I was 12 years old. When I was 12, I had a really great friend who I still keep in touch with. And I used to go eat dinner at her house, and she was the only child, and her parents would always talk about, politics and what was happening in the world. And, and this was not the dinner conversation that we were having at my house at all. And so I was always really intrigued, because they would always ask well, what's your opinion? And what do you think about this? And I'd be like, God, I don't know. I don't know whether, what I think about this oil spill or this crisis that's happening in a country I never heard of. And my friend Jennifer, actually, when I would go to her house, rather than just sitting in our room sort of talking about who we were having a crush on or looking through teen magazines, we would actually be talking about what can we do. We're really concerned about the whales. We've got to save the whales. So what can two 12-year-old girls do to save the whales? And so we would kind of look through these different magazines, and we found Greenpeace. And so we're like, yeah, well, that's what we're going to do. We're going to go door to door, and we're going to get people to sign a petition and raise money for Greenpeace and do that. And then we found out about animal testing. So we started, it started out in the vein of saving the animals. But then I realized that human beings need saving too. And so, so I think, with Jennifer Hyde sort of like, carrying me along with that little red wagon going door to door, I realized, wait a minute, I actually have this ability to convince people or to talk to people about things that I really care about. And so that was sort of like one sort of moment in time. But, I think that when I started to meditate, when I started to really kind of get in there and familiarize myself with all of these feelings of angst and despair that many of us, I think, feel, especially in this daunting world that we're living in this moment. It's something really interesting happened within me, like in the last, especially the last, I would say, 7 or 8 years. I would identify, yes, that feeling of sadness or that feeling of outrage or that feeling of anger. I can't believe this atrocity is happening in the world. And I used to just like sit with that. I used to just say, okay, well, I'm feeling this. I'm labeling it. I'm going to tame it. And how is it affecting my physiological makeup at this point? Because, I have an autoimmune condition. So I was like really just thinking about how do I lower my stress levels? And what I noticed was that really, I started to kind of move into more of what I call an empathy action. And we've talked about tend and befriend before, right? It's like, I started to move more into, yeah, I'm feeling this way. And the question that would always come to me was, what am I going to do about it? And what I noticed is that, especially when I'm identifying that I'm feeling outrage, and then I say to myself, what am I going to do about it? Sometimes the things I want to do about it are not actually things I should be doing in the world, right? Because it's coming from the wrong place. So really, I would say one of the gifts that, practicing something like loving-kindness practice and metta was able to gift me with was the fact that I could kind of ask a follow-up question to that, which is, and how do I come from a place of love? So I'm angry, I'm identifying what I'm feeling, I'm not being judgmental about it, I'm nurturing the way that I'm feeling, and then moving into, well, what am I going to do about it? And how do I come from a place of love when I do that thing? And that ultimately has led me to show up in these spaces that I don't know that I would have necessarily shown up in, originally. Usually it's spaces that people run the other direction from, or they think, oh, thank God I'm unscathed, So when there's like a mass shooting, or if there's, community that's constantly affected by violence or gun violence or any other type of violence, or, just after a natural disaster, many people just kind of, they can count their blessings if they're unscathed, but they don't necessarily want to run back in to make sure that the others are okay. And so I think what's happened to me in the last 7 or 8 years is that I've really started to just feel much more of this sense of moral obligation. And I've been able to say, yes, we all have agency. But this has become sort of my sense of agency. I've awakened to this sense of agency that I have and that I've always had, but that I didn't really feel empowered to use for a very long time.
Well, the other side of that, since life is such a delicate balancing act, I mean, we need, and some of us need more of that kind of fire and energy and ability to kind of like see what needs to get done. The other side of that is patience.
Yeah.
Because there's so many defeats along the way, or holdups, or times of unclarity, like what's the next step, and you just got to hang in there, and it's hard to hang in there, and so the issue of patience actually brings me back to your book. And I want to say, Shelly's book is incredible. I got to read it early so I could write the afterword. And her experience in publishing the book is like nothing I've ever seen. Like, I've been an author now for a long time. It was a while after I began teaching, which was really a long time ago since I am older. But my life as a writer, my first book came out in 1995, and so many of my friends and my colleagues have written books, and I have seen and heard so many stories, like I schlepped off to Cincinnati and I went to this bookstore and there were no books. That's a common story, and not Cincinnati per se, but someplace, or
Right.
that is a very common story. I have never actually seen a story quite like your story, and I'm so curious about the patience you must be drawing from. And I don't know if you want to tell us your.
Yeah, no, I will share, definitely. I'll share I decided to kind of be vulnerable about this and share the story. And Sharon, you knew about it as it was kind of unfolding. But so my book was originally supposed to come out on October 12th. And sometime in August, my publisher called me and said, there's supply chain issues, which is like a very abstract term, supply chain issues. And we're going to need to push your book launch back to the 26th, a couple weeks, and everything will be okay. We found another printer, et cetera, et cetera. Great. Well, not so fast. October 26th came. And mind you, I came from California to New York to basically engage in different promotional things that I had to do, like a TV spot and an event at the 92Y, et cetera, et cetera. And I also planned, after hiring a PR agency, a 10-day tour. Today is the 10th day, by the way, that 10-day tour. And I had all of these different events planned with people like Sharon and people like Maria Shriver and Chelsea Handler, who wrote the foreword to the book, who all have incredible platforms. And I was very excited about doing these. And on the 26th, the morning that I did my first event, which was with Chelsea Handler, she was promoting the book. We were on a video together. And I started getting these messages from people saying, we want to order your book, but we can't order your book. There's no link. There's no link on Amazon. We're going to Amazon. There's no link. The link is down. So after I got off of that live that I did with Chelsea, I went to Amazon, and lo and behold, they're right. There was no link for my book. So here I was promoting a book to somebody who has like 5 million followers, and nobody could we couldn't buy what I was promoting. So of course I scrambled, called the publisher, was really upset about this because I was about to get on an IG Live with Maria Shriver at 5:00 that evening. And I was like, what am I supposed to promote? Like, this is ridiculous. This is silly. And I thought that was the worst of it. Like, we were going to figure it out and try to get in touch with Amazon. But of course, there's nobody to call at Amazon because everything's automated now. And what ultimately happened was that the books never arrived to the Amazon warehouse. So because they were just stuck in this supply chain that I keep hearing, the chain. So one of the links of the chain was broken or something. And the algorithm that has been programmed for Amazon thought to itself, if it could think, it was like, well, there's no books in the warehouse, therefore this product doesn't exist. So we're just going to remove it from the entire system so that nobody could order it. And that was what was done. And so my publisher, sent in a work order ticket, because there's no human being to contact, to put the link back up, which by the way took 3 days to do. And we thought, okay, we're going to just send people to bookshop.org to buy on bookshop.org, because at least there the link is up, because there's a human being that's actually recognizing the books aren't there, but that the product still exists. Well, that wasn't the end of it. The pre-sales are very important to authors, especially new authors. And I've been working for at least 6 months, on long lead media, as I said, like doing promotional stuff like podcasts and, just trying to gather these book sales. And the number of book sales that I had was pretty significant. It was, in the thousands. And I started within an hour after that first kind of issue in the supply chain. I got a message from a friend I haven't heard from since like middle school, a girl I went to middle school with, who had to hunt down my number from two other people who, she knew I still kept in touch with. And she said, I know you haven't heard from me for a long time. This is so-and-so from middle school, but I just thought you would want to know that I got this message from Amazon that my order has been canceled. And so within the next few hours, I started to get hundreds of emails, messages, screen captures from people saying my order's been canceled, my order's been canceled, from Walmart, from Target, from Amazon. And I realized that a lot of the work that I had done for these pre-orders disappeared. 6 months worth of work disappeared in a matter of hours. And I was defeated. But before I was defeated, I was very upset. I was really, really mad. I mean, really mad. My poor husband, who's usually the punching bag, was like, he didn't know what to do. And I felt so bad because, he wants to fix things, and this can't be fixed by anybody, but not by us. And, I had to continue, like the show must go on. I had these things that were planned. So I just was like pivoting and pivoting and pivoting. And I have to say that I showed up during those sessions, those interviews that I had to continue to do that were already kind of like booked data from the morning till the night. Like Sharon can tell you, like from 8 in the morning until like 8 p.m. I was doing these promotional things. And in between, I would just kind of like go lie down. And most days I didn't even have anything but I would have my pajama bottoms on and then like put on like a shirt, because I just was like, I couldn't even be bothered to get dressed. I was just so depressed. I was so defeated. And by like Saturday, sort of the fog started to lift. I really started to I was working through my feelings on a daily basis. On a daily basis, I was like, at first you go from like this, why me? And then you start to think to yourself, but why not me? Like, it kind of makes sense that this happened to me, right? Because I wrote a book that talks about all of these tools, and maybe I should be taking my own advice. So maybe in some like ironic way, whoever's like orchestrating things, is kind of saying, yeah, let's see if your tools are actually good for something. Let's see if you can just follow your own advice. And so I started to kind of shift from a woe is me mode into like a wisdom is me mode. And I thought, okay, there's something here. There's a lesson to be learned. And certainly there's going to be a lesson that I could teach, right? And there's also obviously the very like essence of like our ego and the way and the way that we hang on to like expectations and the way that we want things to go. And so, right. And what is the root of all suffering? Like our expectations that we hold on to and these attachments that we have. And so I was very attached to this number, this magic number that Amazon gives you. And I was very attached to the outcome and the way that I had hoped or wanted for things to happen. And ultimately I had to kind of like lean into all of those feelings and sort of work through these waves of emotions and use the tools that, that we practice, that we as a community, work on together and that we talk about, but in real time and in real life. And I thought I could just be like a frontline reporter here because I have a front row seat to this supply chain that's very ambiguous. And I can actually start to like talk to people about really what it is that I'm working through and what I'm going through, and have faith also that the book will end up in the hands of the people that need to read it, and that it will be okay, that all will be okay, because if I did the best that I could do, that's all that I could do. So I'm sharing all this with you because really, I think a lot of times, we talk about a lot of these tools and we talk about these concepts as theories in abstraction. We really, I think sometimes just need to kind of play them out in real life, because life is happening every single day to us. Life is happening every day, and we have the opportunity every single day to, when things happen to us that we don't want these things to happen to us, but also to, I think, deliberately put ourselves in positions of discomfort as well, to actually get in there and say, okay, well, I'm feeling comfortable, so maybe I should be putting myself in a position where I'm having a difficult conversation with somebody that I want to avoid, having that conversation with. So that was my lesson in patience. And I have to say, I was an abysmal failure for the first few days. I was not very patient. I was agitated.
In a minute, I'm going to actually probably ask you to list some of those tools, but first I have a couple of comments. One is, I think, thank you, for being that vulnerable. And sometimes it's hard. I know you work with a lot of people who are suffering mightily every day. And Shelly's the person who brought me into the community of people who've suffered from gun violence. And plus there's Pandemic of Love, which we of course should talk about as well. And sometimes, in that role or with that kind of position, one's own suffering seems unworthy, or inauthentic. It's like, how can I possibly feel so defeated, when so-and-so can't afford rent? And, I've been working so hard on getting them that rent money. And it's something, I think it was actually Viktor Frankl, of all people, Holocaust survivor, spoke about that, like sort of never, I'm not going to say it as well as he said it, but it's something like, don't ever degrade your suffering.
Yeah.
Even if it's coming from a seemingly more minor or petty place, it hurts, and that is something that has to be dealt with. And then, of course, I think you found the answer to all of life's ills, which was feeding other people, because you showed up at my apartment in New York with four bags of food from Zabar's arrived before you did. I'm leaving tomorrow. What am I going to do with 4 bags of food? But many people have eaten from and enjoyed that food.
Yeah. Well, that's my MO. That's my MO. Like when I'm sad or when I feel like I have no control over what's happening around me, then what can I control? What can I actually control in this moment? And, I can control, I can help people. I can look for somebody to help, or I can feed somebody, or I could be of service, because I can't be of service to myself right now. Ultimately, that cracks open my heart a little bit. And then I have a lot more empathy for myself. Because oftentimes we find it so hard to love ourselves. It's so much easier to love somebody else, to love somebody who's lovable, and just lambast ourselves and flog ourselves for all of our, afflictions, et cetera. So yeah. So in that moment, that was Friday evening, it was Shabbat dinner. Tuesday, this whole thing happened. So this is the timeline. And on Friday morning, I said, Sharon, I'm going to order food. And I went on zabars.com and I ordered, there were 3 of us, mind you. I ordered 4 rotisserie chicken. By the way, I didn't know I'm vegan, so I just want to make that clear. I didn't realize it was like a whole chicken. I thought it was a piece of chicken. I didn't know it was like the whole chicken. So I ordered 4 chickens for 3 people, and 1 is a vegan, and Sharon was leaving the next day.
It was a lot of food, but God bless you. So amongst the tools, helping somebody else, if you can. You talked about leading into the suffering, not trying to avoid it.
Yes.
What else?
I would say that one of the biggest lessons for me, and I love leaning on rain practice, that Tara Brach teaches so beautifully, is really because it's, yes, you as Dr. Dan Siegel says, you have to name it to tame it. And that's great. Yes, identify the emotion. But then once you identify it, what do you do with it? So my default would always be to judge myself for this emotion. Then all of a sudden you have the primary emotion, and then you have the secondary emotion to the primary emotion, and the tertiary, and then you're judging that. And it's it's a never ending cycle. And so I love the fact that I can just sit with it and say, okay, then I'm allowing this emotion to be with non-judgment. And now I'm going to be curious about it. Why am I feeling this way? Why am I feeling this way? Really, let me just investigate and get in there and understand that I'm feeling this way because my feelings are valid, right? That's eventually what I rested on, was like, my feelings are valid. I have every right to feel the way I do. Yes, other people are suffering. However, I'm suffering in this moment. It's not a suffering competition. And I think a lot of times we have that too in this culture that we're in, like, who has it worse? Um, and then, from that place of like nurturing myself and allowing that to happen, I can actually just, hold myself tenderly and start to think from a clearer place. Like the fog just starts to lift. And on Sunday morning, I have to tell you, like, I woke up on Sunday morning and it was the first day that I didn't have anything on my agenda since I got here, which, to New York. And I said to Jason, as we were walking to breakfast, I said, I'm done being sad today. Today I'm done being sad. I'm like, maybe tomorrow I'll be sad again. I don't know. But today I'm done being sad. I'm just done. I'm over. I've worked through it, and I just want to now be in this moment. And it was a beautiful day. It was sunny. It was one of those beautiful, crisp autumn New York days. And I just thought, what am I going to be sad about? I'm feeling fortunate and lucky to be alive in this moment. And so I'm going to embrace that.
It's beautiful. And we should really talk about Pandemic of Love before we, turn this over to discussion and to all of you to see if you have questions or comments. So.
Well, Pandemic of Love is a mutual aid organization that I founded in March of 2020, around the time that the pandemic started. I was living in South Florida at the time. I was really I had a meditation community of many thousands of meditators that would gather on Sunday mornings for 5 years prior to that moment, every Sunday morning on the beach in South Florida. And I felt, obviously very responsible for the people in my community. I knew many of them very personally and intimately. And I knew that there were many individuals who relied on things like free lunch and breakfast for their children at school, right? Which covers 10 meals a week when you think about it. And I knew that those individuals, if we would go into shutdown mode, which was inevitable at that moment, because you were seeing what was happening in New York and what was happening out on the West Coast, that inevitably we would also go into lockdown mode, and these individuals would not be able to, just like when there's a hurricane coming and people tell you, make sure you get your provisions. Well, if the hurricane's coming on a Monday and you don't get paid till Friday, guess what? You're not getting your provisions. You know what I mean? Because you literally are living from hand to mouth, or you're living paycheck to paycheck. And so I wanted to make sure that those individuals had enough. And I knew that there were many people in my community, myself included, who had more than enough. And so I had used mutual aid before, but more informally and more like in a closed network, right? So as a community, when I knew that there was somebody who needed a ride somewhere, or, lost their job, or, was sick, we would basically, come together as a community, or I would find the people that are hiring, or find people that could assist with a ride or what have you, and kind of help them fulfill that need, right? Without them necessarily always having to ask for help. And certainly after hurricanes, which was a regular occurrence and is a regular occurrence in Florida, every time after a hurricane or a storm would happen, mutual aid organizations would rise up because people need help in that moment. And there's actually a really great book that I read and that I quote in the book by Rebecca Skolnick, who it's called a Paradise Built in Hell. And it talks about how after crisis, right, after wars, after a tragedy like 9/11, after natural disasters, after a pandemic or during a pandemic, all of these altruistic things start to rise up. And then suddenly when things go back to normal, and you probably are noticing this now as we are in whatever this new normal is, those things start to sort of peter away. And anyway, so knowing what I did about mutual aid and having used it before, I decided that I was going to create 2 links. One was called the Give Help link on Google Forms, just a simple form with 6 or 7 questions. One was called Get Help. And the idea was that we were just going to match individuals in our community who filled out the Give the Help link with people who needed that particular type of help. So if you were somebody who said, I'm willing to pay somebody's car bill this month, or I'm willing to buy a supermarket gift card once a week for a family, you know, then we would match them with a person that said, I need this. And I posted a very short video on my social media, thinking that only my community would see it, because really only my community were following me on social media. And I went to bed and I woke up the next morning, and I was shocked when I went into the forums and saw that hundreds and hundreds of people have filled out the form. And it was interesting because I didn't really know 90% of the names that were on this list. And I was like, who are these people? Like, where did they even come from? And it wasn't until I started to look at my social media that I saw that people like, you know, like Maria Shriver had reposted these links. And so these two simple forms, it was not even called Pandemic of Love at that time, went viral. They went around, no pun intended, but yes, that's what happened. They went around the world and came back. And suddenly within 24 hours, I started getting messages from people all over the world, from every country you can imagine, saying, this is such a cool idea. How can we replicate these forms? So I started to replicate the forms for people. And this is where my 20 years of corporate kind of, you know, experience started to kick in. I started to think, well, how do I build this so it's really more automated and exportable and scalable? And, you know, how do we start building community around that? And, you know, where we are today is we, meaning Pandemic of Love, has made over 2 million matches, meaning we've matched over 2 million people in need and people who need help directly. And those individuals between them have transacted over $60 million. And we have over 280 micro communities or chapters that are run by thousands of volunteers. And we're in about 16 countries, maybe 17 at this point, which is pretty incredible. But it's also a testament to the fact that, you know, that love can also go viral, right? And that so can kindness, and so can all these positive things as well. And that it's a testament that, you know, a lot of people doing a little bit can equal a huge impact. And that if we just show up for our communities, right? Because that was my intention. My intention was, like, to use the Buddhist proverb, like, tend to the areas of the gardens that you can reach. That was the garden, my part of the garden that I could reach, my own community in my backyard. I wasn't thinking about, you know, somebody in Seattle or somebody in Italy at the time. I was thinking about who's in my community that needs help. And the idea is that if each one of us just do that, you know, it's incredibly beautiful. It's an incredibly beautiful thing. One of the things, Sharon, that I do want to touch on is that one of the things that really makes Pandemic of Love unique, and you and I have talked about this, is the fact that we directly connect people. We're not a nonprofit, right? We don't take money. Like, it's not like donor gives Pandemic of Love money and then the money gets transferred to the other person. We vet the individual in need. We connect them directly via email or text message, however the donor wants to be connected to them. And they have to have a conversation. There has to be, we go back to what we started talking about, which is proximity. There has to be proximity. So you are suddenly two perfect strangers get on the phone and have to have a conversation. And one of them has to say to the other, what do you need? How can I help you? And that is just like, oh, like, what's more beautiful than that? You know, that question. Like, I'm here for you. I'm here at a time of disconnection. I'm here to connect with you, to tell you you matter and that you're seen and that you're heard. And for many of these individuals, they haven't been asked that question in a very, very long time.
I'm wondering if you could read that letter that is also in your book.
Yeah, that would, I think, be a
really
good
about
place.
this point.
Yeah, that would be a great place for us to actually also then open it up, I think, after So this is a letter from a Pandemic of Love match. I've gotten thousands of letters. I share them almost weekly through a column in Time magazine called Evidence of Human Kindness. And so this is a letter from Eileen, who identifies herself as a liberal New York Jew. And I'm going to read you the letter that she wrote to me. Dear Shelly, I'm writing to tell you about my incredible experience with Christine, the woman I was matched with in Alabama. Originally, as you know, I was really upset that I, a liberal feminist New Yorker who had spent my whole life working for equality and justice, was matched with a woman from the South who would think of me as nothing more than a Yankee. I decided to call her anyway, figuring that perhaps she won't live up to the narrative I have of a single mother in Alabama living in a trailer, who would think of me as nothing more than a Yankee. I decided to call her anyway, figuring that perhaps she won't live up to the narrative I have of a single mother in Alabama living in a trailer. You teach us through your meditations to open our hearts and to have non-judgment. And so I figured I should do that in real life, not just in my mind when meditating. So I called her, and guess what? She was exactly what I thought she would be. A fervent Trump supporter. Yes, I went there. And someone who stood for everything that I fought against my entire life. A racist, an anti-Semite, a white supremacist. After our conversations, I did not want to give her any help with her groceries. But then I started to think about what Michelle Obama, whom I admire greatly, said, that when they go low, we go high. So I mustered up all of my wits and energy, and I thought, if I don't help her, I will confirm everything she thinks about a snowflake from the city. But if I help her, I may help to create a bridge or a shift, her thinking about it. I was certain she had probably never run into anyone like me before. So nauseous as it made me, I reached out to her again, and I told her that I would be emailing her a gift card to Walmart bi-weekly for her groceries, so she and her children would be able to have food and the essentials they needed during quarantine. She was incredibly appreciative, and I wound up lightening up a little, so I asked her about her children, and she told me all about her daughter and son, 10 and 8 respectively. I asked her what they like to do, and I was taken aback when she said that her son likes sports, but her daughter likes to read and that she, quote, doesn't know where she gets that from. I knew that this was my Trojan horse moment. And so I asked her if I could ship her daughter some age-appropriate books. And she said her daughter would love that. And so I proceeded to send her a dozen books that all had a strong message of equality, social justice, diversity, and inclusion. And that would hopefully expand her world beyond the trailer park in Mobile where she was living. So fast forward, Christine and I speak every other week at least. She sent me photos of her kids and texts. Her daughter loved the books I sent her, and now I'm sending her more. And I still help her with her groceries bi-weekly. Dare I say it, we have even become friends. Do we talk about politics? Sure. I've told her about my family's history in the Holocaust. I've talked to her about my work prior to retirement in New York in social justice and in the gay pride movement. She actually has a lot of liberal views. For example, she has, quote, no issue with gay people. They can love who they want as long as they don't touch me. But she doesn't understand the connection between many of her views and the services she relies on, food stamps, for example, and the Democratic Party. It's actually shocking to me, not that she thinks this way, but how far removed I am, how long I have been living in a bubble too. How many Christines could I have reached out to and connected with? I'm writing to you because this random connection has created a shift in me, in an old Jewish woman who thought she was too old to shift. I never thought I would be friends with somebody who had voted for Trump, and here we are. I have hopes I can sway her vote differently in November, and I won't give up trying, but I have decided that I will help her even if she doesn't. She is a victim of the systems of government as well, a cycle of poverty and education. I hope her son and daughter find their way out. With all my love, Eileen.
Oh, it's very beautiful. I should have thought of Eileen when I was giving away chickens from Zabar. You know, it's like, she's a Jewish woman in New York. It would have been perfect. And I mean, just listening to you, I think about, kind of where I started with, which agency, think of March 2020, everybody, and the mind state we were in, and the shock and unknown and the anxiety, and how much I kind of vaguely thought, gee, it would be nice if somebody, did something to help people. Or like, and there you were, let's do it. So this is a great time to open up for questions or comments. If you,
Yeah.
Monique is going to help us. If you want to use the raise hands function, I guess Monique is in charge. That I have yet to really get on top of. Or you can put something in the chat if you.
Definitely. Definitely. Or if you just want to know how to order from Zabar's, I could do that too. I can help you with put in your order for Shabbat dinner on Friday.
I would wager that they know.
Oh, my Lord. So funny. So great.
Because we
Maybe
neglected to
there are
ask where
questions.
everyone was tuning in from. It may not be New York at all. You may not even know what Zabar's is.
That's true, actually. Let's say, so Nancy wrote, thank you for this inspiring conversation. I'm wondering if you partner at all with Valerie Carr. And actually, Sharon connected me by email to Valerie before her book came out. And I think it was also around the time, I think we were like at the cusp of, or in the middle of the pandemic. And so Valerie and I, believe it or not, have never had a conversation. We are like in each other's orbits all the time because people tag me on her stuff and people tag her on my stuff. But she is definitely somebody that is on my radar, and that I really believe that she and I will absolutely intersect, because we're obviously in the same wavelength and people associate us with each other often. And so, yeah, she's inspiring. I've read her work. I've watched her speeches, and I admire her greatly. But thank you so much for asking that. And thank you, Wendy, for your comment. It is stunning what you have done. I appreciate that. But it's not what I did. I was simply a person that threw the pebble in the water. And I think we discount that often, right? When you look at the number of like even $60 million, it sounds like a really big number. It is a really big number. I don't want to discount that. But when you extrapolate it out mathematically, and you know that the average donation from our donors, from people that like help other people, is $135, that's the average across the board, you start to recognize, well, wait a minute, it's a testament to how a lot of people doing a little bit, not that 135 is a little bit, but like relatively speaking, compared to that big number, can create this huge impact. And so, it's not what I've done. I maybe inspired people to do something else or created an infrastructure, but I think a lot of times we hesitate. We're standing on this precipice, and we're standing, in this moment, and we think, well, what can I do? I'm just one person. And for me, like, one of the greatest gifts has been the ability to, tell my son, who I've been saying this to my entire life. He's 19 now. Like, one person can really make a difference. Now, all of a sudden I could say, you see, one person really can make a difference, and he can actually believe me. So, that's been pretty cool too. The book is called How Radical Self-Care Can Change the World. And the premise of the book is really that the best version of the world has to start with the best version of us. So I really go in the book, I really talk a lot about how we can create formalized self-care plans, how we can and should create formalized self-care plans, and how we need to sort of move from this notion that self-care is an individualistic pursuit and move into the thinking that it has to be a communal pursuit, that we are responsible for taking care of each other, for building these beautiful safety nets, for making sure that everybody in our circles of influence and community have enough. And, that's really the premise. So it's a guideline too. Like, I sort of codify all of these things that I personally have done, which is create a self-care plan, share that care plan with other individuals in a formalized community of care who each also have a self-care plan. And then we can discuss what our obstacles are and help each other remove those obstacles, help hold each other accountable, help motivate each other. Think about it in the framework of like, if you're the type of person that doesn't really like to work out, but you have a friend that you're committed to going to the gym with every morning, right? You're more likely to go to the gym every morning, right? Or if you are a person that needs to, for your own health or what have you, like make sure that you're moving on a daily basis, but you are a single mother and you don't have time, you have time poverty, right? People in your community who have enough time, have more than enough time, can offer to help and say, you know what, I will come babysit for you once a week so you can go do this thing that you need to do, right? And so the idea here is that, every single human being on this planet has something that they need. I don't care how rich you are. Every single person has something they need, and every single person has something that they can offer. And if we can connect those individuals together that kind of have the missing pieces for each other, then it's this beautiful redistribution of wealth that we can create. And everybody's richer for it, right? Everybody has enough. So the book itself sort of lays out how we can do this and how we can get back to community and get back to this magical time period that I remember my grandparents would always tell me about, called back in the day. Back in the day when we knew our neighbors, back in the day when we, when somebody got sick, we would take over some chicken soup. They wouldn't even have to ask for it. If somebody lost their job, we made sure they kept a roof over their head. We felt like we had an inherent moral obligation to take care of each other. And we've just through, capitalism and through our cultures and industrialization and the technology revolution, et cetera, we just keep getting further and further and further away from that. And, now we're moving into the metaverse, whatever that's going to be like, which I'm really not a fan of at this point. But, I feel like we're just getting further and further away from really what makes us human, which is taking care of each other and living in the shelter of each other's hearts and of each other's arms.
Shelly, there were some questions in the chat, like why didn't you start a nonprofit?
Yeah, I did not start a nonprofit because Pandemic of Love is a nonprofit disruptor, which is not to say that we don't work with, we do. We work with so many nonprofits. We work with Innocence Project. We work with United Farm Workers Foundation, with the Red Cross. We work with smaller nonprofits to help them amplify and pivot and sort of bridge a lot of the gaps that they have that prevent them from reacting quickly to things. Like when the Texas storms happened, we were like able to immediately assist people on the ground, families that we already had pre-vetted in Texas through our chapters, whereas it would take a very long time for a Red Cross type organization or even FEMA for that matter to come and get on the ground, right? As pipes were bursting and people needed to go like put gas in their car to flee or to, go to a hotel, but they couldn't afford one, et cetera. So we consciously decided not to become a nonprofit because I think that the idea here is that we don't need anything more than sort of very loose infrastructure to just remind people that we don't need a nonprofit to do good deeds in this world and to be kind to each other. And so really we're, the idea here is that we're just inspiring people and giving them the ability to connect with other people that are in need. And somebody said in the chat, can you hold up a picture of the book? So yeah, it's on here. Now it's not blurry. Yeah. So this is the book. It's Sit Down to Rise Up. And foreword is written by Chelsea Handler, who's a friend of mine. And the afterword is written by Sharon Salzberg, who is a friend of mine. And it's it should be available. I don't want to say it's available now. It is, you can pre-order it. You can go to Amazon, you can go to bookshop.org and support your local bookstore. And it's going to ship out in the next, hopefully in the next week or so. So Yeah, definitely place your pre-orders. And I know that the date is going to show as November 16th. But they did that so that it doesn't cancel the orders again.
And it is available right now on Kindle and also on audio.
It is. Thank you for
read
that.
it on audio, right? It's your voice.
I did. I read it. I read it on audio. Yeah. So it is on Audible and it is available immediately on Kindle. Bina asks, how do you and staff support yourselves? We don't have staff. We're all volunteers. It's a 100% grassroots organization. We have thousands of volunteers who each work in micro communities around the country. And we connect to share best practices, but I don't get paid from this. Like, I'm here trying to hawk books. That's how I'm making a living. But no, it's all based on the power, empowered by love. And that's it. 100% of what you give goes directly to the person because you're giving it to them directly. Nothing, there's no overhead, there are no fees. It's not like a GoFundMe. It's just a person has a light bill. Oh, I'll pay that light bill. Bam, it's that easy. You can go to pandemicoflove.com and you can you can check to see if there is a chapter in your area by putting in your zip code. And if there is not one, then it will give you the option to form one. And once you fill out that form, it sort of gives you the minimum things that you need, because there are like a few things that you have to kind of get together. At least 5 volunteers is one of the main tenets. And then you fill out that form and somebody will contact you and will tell you when the next training is and when we can onboard you as a new community.
I should say there also, some of your work is available on on Audible, both are
yes.
true, which I think deals very specifically, as does your book, but with like a self-care plan and.
Yeah, actually on Mindful, there's a course right now on Mindful that it comes with a free book. So I'll put that course link. It's called Radical Self-Care. And it's just a video course that I pre-recorded for mindful.org that you can order and watch at your convenience or leisure. And there are a few, tangible practices in there as well that I lead. And then when you place the order before I think the end of this week, then it comes with a free book.
Because this is, that's the whole reality. It's a whole sliver of reality. Those who are on the front lines of suffering in a way, whether it's in your family and with your friends or professionally, and finding some balance and in those situations seems really essential.
Definitely.
And the Garrison Institute, of course, has all kinds of programs about that very thing as well. Yes, they do. So, I'm just so grateful for everybody. Oh, there's one more question, actually, I'm very interested in too. Is there an age limit to be involved? Can this be taken to kids in schools?
So the way that kids in schools have helped us, and actually last year, our entire holiday campaign was really run mostly by high school students who we were able to give volunteer hours to. So we don't allow the kids to vet the individuals in need, because a lot of times it's a very kind of sticky situation. It could be very emotional. It can, be traumatizing, depending on who you're getting on the phone. And then, we've got a process sort of in place, and there's trainings in place to train a person who's vetting donors or vetting individuals in need. But they help to, but high school students especially can assist with, things like building Amazon wish lists for kids. Last year, we partnered with COVID Survivors for Change, which is an organization that referred thousands. We had, I think we gifted over close to 2,000 children who lost a parent to COVID and were also in financial distress, who otherwise would not have had a holiday, you know? And so we, these high school students helped to build these Amazon wish lists for these kids based on these intake forms that we had them fill out, of like what their favorite color was and what size was this and what are their hobbies, what do they like to do, and what would be the one thing that they really want to get for, you know, for Christmas or for Hanukkah. And so they were able to put those wish lists together better than I think most adults would be able to put those wish lists together. And we were able to provide a holiday for a lot of kids in need after an incredibly difficult year. Well, great. Well, thank you, Bina, for that. I appreciate that. That comment, very sweet. But thank you guys so much. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for sharing the evening with us. It was really fun. Sharon, it's so great to see you. I'll see you in person next week. And yeah, I'm very happy that we're here. And I'm really happy to be a part of the Garrison community as well. So thank you. Thank you all.